The emergency call came through at 3:47 a.m. on a cold November morning. St. Michael's Medical Center, one of the most prestigious private hospitals in the country, received word that they would be admitting a critical patient within the hour. What made this case unusual wasn't just the late hour or the severity of the condition, it was who the patient was. The only child of Marcus Aldridge, a pharmaceutical billionaire whose name appeared on buildings across 3 continents. The boy, 12-year-old Daniel Aldridge, was dying, and nobody knew why. When the ambulance arrived, 17 of the world's leading specialists were already assembled in the hospital's state-of-the-art emergency wing. These weren't ordinary doctors. They were the best in their fields. Infectious disease experts from Switzerland, neurologists from Japan, toxicologists from Germany, and pulmonologists from Boston. Each had been flown in on private jets, their fees guaranteed regardless of the outcome. Money was no object when it came to saving Marcus Aldridge's son. Dr. Sarah Chen, the hospital's chief of internal medicine, was the first to examine Daniel when he was wheeled through the doors. What she saw made her blood run cold. The boy's skin had taken on an unnatural grayish tone, as if all the color had been drained from his body. His breathing was labored and shallow, each breath seeming to require enormous effort. His eyes, though open, appeared unfocused and distant. But what disturbed Dr. Chen most was something she couldn't quite define. An instinct, perhaps, honed over 20 years of medicine, that told her this case was unlike anything she had encountered before. The medical team moved with practiced efficiency, transferring Daniel to the intensive care unit. Monitors were attached to his chest, arms, and fingers. IV lines were inserted. Blood samples were drawn and rushed to the lab for immediate analysis. Within minutes, the room was filled with the steady beeping of machines and the quiet urgency of medical professionals doing what they did best, fighting for a life. But as the hours passed, that initial confidence began to erode. The first round of test results came back completely normal. Blood work showed no signs of infection, no unusual cell counts, no indicators of disease. His organs appeared to be functioning, yet clearly something was catastrophically wrong. His oxygen saturation levels kept dropping despite supplemental oxygen. His body temperature fluctuated wildly between dangerous extremes, and that strange gray color deepened with each passing hour. Dr. Chen ordered more tests, CT scans, MRIs, ultrasounds, every imaging technology available was deployed. Specialists huddled in small groups debating possibilities. Was it an autoimmune disorder? An unknown virus? Some rare genetic condition? They threw out theories like scattered puzzle pieces, but none of them fit together into a coherent picture. Marcus Aldridge paced the hallway outside the ICU, his usually commanding presence reduced to that of any frightened father. His expensive suit was rumpled, his hair disheveled. Every few minutes, he would stop at the window looking into his son's room, pressing his palm against the glass, as if trying to reach through it. Wealth and power meant nothing here. All the money in the world couldn't buy an answer to a question nobody understood. By the second day, the situation had grown more desperate. Daniel's condition was deteriorating. His breathing had become even more labored, and he was now only semi-conscious, drifting in and out of awareness. The doctors increased their efforts, trying different combinations of medications, attempting experimental treatments. Nothing worked. It was as if they were fighting an invisible enemy, one that left no traces, no clues, no patterns they could recognize. The hospital itself became a pressure cooker of stress and fear. News of Daniel Aldridge's mysterious illness had leaked to the media, and reporters crowded outside the main entrance, their cameras trained on every person who entered or exited. Security was tripled. The hospital administration held emergency meetings, concerned about both the boy's welfare and the institution's reputation. How could the best medical facility in the region, staffed by the world's top doctors, be unable to diagnose a 12-year-old boy? In the ICU, the atmosphere grew increasingly tense. Nurses spoke in hushed voices, doctors snapped at each other during consultations, frustration mounting with each failed attempt at treatment. The beeping of the monitors seemed to grow louder, more insistent, as if the machines themselves were demanding answers. But answers remained elusive. Dr. Chen found herself standing alone in Daniel's room late on the second night, after most of the other specialists had left to rest. She studied the boy's face, searching for something, anything, that might provide a clue. His gray skin almost seemed to glow in the dim light of the monitors. His chest rose and fell in that same struggling rhythm. And then she noticed something she hadn't paid attention to before. A faint, unusual odor in the room. Not the typical hospital smell of disinfectant and medicine. Something else. Something organic and slightly musty, like earth after rain. She made a note of it, though she didn't know what it meant. Was it significant, or was her exhausted mind grasping at straws? She had been awake for nearly 40 hours, surviving on coffee and adrenaline. Perhaps she was imagining things. Still, she wrote it down in her notes. Unusual odor in patient's room. The medical team regrouped the next morning for another consultation. 17 tired faces gathered around the conference table, each doctor carrying thick folders of test results and medical records. They went through everything again, looking for patterns, connections, anomalies. But every avenue led to a dead end. One of the senior specialists, Dr. Klaus Werner from Berlin, summed up what everyone was thinking. It's like we're fighting a ghost. We can see the effects, but we cannot find the cause. While the world's most accomplished doctors struggled to solve the mystery upstairs, life in the lower levels of St. Michael's Medical Center continued as it always had. The maintenance staff arrived before dawn to prepare the building for another day. Kitchen workers prepared meals for patients and staff, and the cleaning crews moved through the halls with their carts, making sure every surface gleamed under the fluorescent lights. Among these workers was Maria Torres, a woman who had cleaned hospitals for the past 15 years. She was quiet, efficient, and largely invisible to the doctors and nurses who passed her in the hallways. To them, she was simply part of the hospital's machinery, as unremarkable as the mop she pushed across the floors. But Maria had a daughter, and that daughter was currently sitting on a bench in the hospital's main corridor, doing her homework while waiting for her mother's shift to end. Her name was Lily Torres. She was 10 years old, small for her age, with dark eyes that seemed too large for her thin face. Lily came to the hospital 3 times a week after school because she had nowhere else to go. Her mother couldn't afford childcare, and their apartment was too far away for Lily to get home on her own. So she sat in the hospital corridors, working on math problems and reading assignments, surrounded by the constant flow of medical staff and visitors. Most people walked past Lily without noticing her. She was just another child in the waiting area, unremarkable and easily overlooked. But Lily noticed everything. She watched the nurses rush from room to room. She observed doctors speaking in serious tones. She saw families crying in the chapel and others laughing with relief in the cafeteria. The hospital had become her second home, and she had learned to read its rhythms and moods. On the 3rd day of Daniel Aldridge's hospitalization, Lily noticed the change in atmosphere. The hospital felt different, charged with an unusual tension. Security guards stood at the entrance to the VIP wing, something she had never seen before. Doctors walked faster, their faces etched with worry. And there were whispers everywhere, hushed conversations that stopped abruptly when someone walked by. Lily's natural curiosity drew her attention to the VIP wing. She found herself watching that hallway more than usual, wondering what was happening behind those guarded doors. During her mother's lunch break, Maria had mentioned something about a very sick boy, the son of someone important. But Maria didn't know the details, and hospital policy prevented the cleaning staff from discussing patients. What Lily did know, however, was loss. 6 months earlier, her own father had died in this very hospital. Roberto Torres had been a construction worker, strong and healthy until he suddenly wasn't. Lily remembered every moment of those terrible 3 weeks when her father had been a patient here. She remembered sitting in the waiting room, watching her mother cry. She remembered sneaking glances into her father's room, seeing him grow weaker each day. But more than anything, Lily remembered the confusion. The doctors couldn't figure out what was wrong with her father. Just like now, with this boy everyone was talking about. They had run test after test, given him medicine after medicine, but nothing helped. Her father's skin had turned that same gray color she'd heard nurses whispering about when discussing the Aldridge boy. His breathing had become labored and difficult, and there had been that smell in his room, that strange earthy smell that reminded her of the park after it rained. The memories were painful, but Lily had learned not to cry about them anymore. Instead, she carried them with her like stones in her pocket, heavy but familiar. She thought about her father every day, wondered what had really happened to him. The doctors had said it was an unknown illness, a phrase that meant they had no answers. Her mother had been too devastated to push for more information, and Lily had been too young to know what questions to ask. Now, sitting on her usual bench, Lily found herself thinking about her father more than she had in weeks. Something about the atmosphere in the hospital, the whispered conversations about the mysterious illness, triggered her memories. She pulled out her notebook, pretending to work on homework, but her mind was elsewhere. During a break between classes, Lily had wandered closer to the VIP wing than usual. She stayed back, not wanting to be shooed away by the security guards, but close enough to hear fragments of conversation. Two nurses stood near the nursing station, their voices low but audible if you were paying attention, and Lily was always paying attention. "Never seen anything like it," one nurse said. "Poor kid," the other responded. "They've brought in specialists from everywhere." Dr. Chen mentioned something strange about the room, said there was an odd smell. Lily's hand stopped moving across her notebook page. That smell, the same one from her father's room. Her heart began to beat faster. It couldn't be a coincidence, could it? Two patients, both with mysterious symptoms that doctors couldn't explain, both with that same unusual odor. She thought back to those final days with her father. She had been in his room more than her mother realized. While Maria was speaking with doctors or handling paperwork, Lily would slip into Roberto's room and sit quietly in the corner. She had watched him struggle to breathe. She had seen the confusion in his eyes when the doctors asked him questions. And she had heard him say something that nobody seemed to take seriously. Her father had complained about his throat. Not a sore throat like when you had a cold, but something different. He kept saying it felt like something was stuck inside, something that moved. The doctors had examined him, shone lights down his throat, but found nothing. They had dismissed it as the rambling of a sick man, perhaps delirium from whatever infection they assumed he had. But Lily had believed him. She had looked into her father's eyes and seen that he was telling the truth, that he really did feel something in his throat. She wanted to tell the doctors, wanted to insist they look harder, but she was just a child. Nobody asked for her opinion. Nobody thought she might have something important to say. Now, months later, sitting in the hospital corridor, listening to nurses discuss another patient with similar symptoms, Lily felt something stirring inside her. A connection was forming in her mind, pieces of a puzzle clicking together. She didn't have all the pieces yet, didn't understand what they meant, but she knew, with the certainty that only comes from direct experience, that what was happening to Daniel Aldridge had happened to her father. The question was, what could a 10-year-old girl do with that knowledge? Who would listen to her? She was the daughter of a cleaning woman, a child who spent her afternoons doing homework in hospital corridors. She had no credentials, no authority, no reason for anyone to take her seriously. Even her own mother might dismiss her concerns as the lingering grief of a daughter who hadn't finished mourning. But Lily also knew she couldn't stay silent. Her father had died because nobody understood what was wrong with him. If the same thing was happening to this boy, if he had the same mysterious illness, then maybe something from her father's case could help. Maybe the doctors were missing something, just like they had missed something with Roberto Torres. Lily closed her notebook and stood up. She wasn't sure what she was going to do yet, but she knew she had to do something. She had to find a way to make someone listen. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. Something stuck in here. Those words had haunted her for months. Now they might be the key to saving another life. She watched the VIP wing, her young mind working through possibilities. How could she get close enough to observe? How could she see if the symptoms really were the same? And if they were, how could she convince anyone that a 10-year-old girl might know something that 17 world-renowned doctors had missed? The challenge seemed impossible. But Lily had learned something important from watching her father die. Sometimes the most important truths are the ones nobody wants to hear. And sometimes the quietest voices carry the most vital messages. She just had to find a way to hers heard. Lily sat on her bench for another hour, her homework forgotten, her mind racing through possibilities. She needed to find a way to make someone listen, but approaching the doctors directly seemed impossible. They were too busy, too focused, too important to stop for a child. And even if one of them did pause long enough to hear her out, would they believe her? Would they take seriously the observations of a 10-year-old girl whose only credential was that she had watched her father die? She thought about going to her mother first, explaining what she had noticed. But Maria was exhausted, working double shifts to make ends meet after Roberto's death. And more importantly, her mother had been so traumatized by losing her husband that she couldn't bear to talk about those final weeks. Every time Lily tried to bring it up, Maria would change the subject or find an excuse to leave the room. The grief was too raw, too painful. No, Lily realized, she would have to find another way. She needed evidence, something concrete that would force the doctors to listen. Her father's medical records. If she could get those documents and show them to someone, maybe they would see the connection she had seen. Maybe they would understand that this wasn't just a child's imagination or unprocessed grief, it was real. But how could she get those records? Her mother had them somewhere at home, packed away in a box that Maria couldn't bring herself to open. Lily had seen her mother put them there, had watched her seal the box with tape and push it to the back of the closet. That box represented everything Maria wanted to forget. Opening it would mean facing the reality of Roberto's death all over again. Lily made a decision. That evening, when they got home from the hospital, she would wait until her mother was asleep. Then she would retrieve the box, find the medical records, and bring them back to the hospital the next day. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was all she had. The rest of the day crawled by. Lily tried to focus on her homework, but the words on the page blurred together. Her mind kept returning to her father's face during those final days. The way he had pointed to his throat, the desperation in his eyes when he tried to make the doctors understand. She remembered one particular moment, crystal clear despite the months that had passed. It was 2 days before he died. Lily had been sitting in the corner of his room, drawing pictures to distract herself from the beeping machines and the smell of medicine. Her father had suddenly started coughing, a violent fit that shook his whole body. A nurse had rushed in, checked his vitals, tried to calm him down. When the coughing finally stopped, Roberto had grabbed the nurse's hand with surprising strength. "Please," he had gasped, his voice barely audible. "Look again. There's something in my throat." The nurse had been kind, but dismissive. "Mr. Torres, we've examined your throat multiple times. There's nothing there." "No," Roberto had insisted, his grip tightening. "It's alive." The nurse had gently extracted her hand and adjusted his medication. "Try to rest." But Lily had seen her father's face after the nurse left. The frustration, the fear, the helplessness of not being believed. She had wanted to run after the nurse, to shake her and make her understand that her father wasn't confused or delirious. But she had been too scared, too young, too uncertain of her own perceptions. Now she had a second chance. She wouldn't make the same mistake twice. When Maria's shift finally ended at 6 o'clock, they took the bus home as usual. Their apartment was small, just 2 bedrooms in an old building on the edge of the city. It wasn't much, but it was home. Maria heated up leftover rice and beans for dinner while Lily set the table. They ate in relative silence, both lost in their own thoughts. After dinner, Maria settled onto the couch with a cup of coffee, her body sagging with exhaustion. Lily did the dishes, then announced she was going to bed early. Maria looked surprised but relieved. "Good idea, mija." Lily went to her room and changed into her pajamas, but she didn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the apartment. The television murmuring in the living room, her mother's occasional sigh, the footsteps of neighbors in the apartment above. She waited, patient and still, until finally the apartment fell silent. Around 11 o'clock, Lily heard her mother's bedroom door close. She waited another 30 minutes, making sure Maria had fallen asleep. Then, moving as quietly as possible, she crept out of her room and into the hallway. The closet her mother used for storage was just outside Maria's bedroom. Every creak of the floorboards sounded impossibly loud in the darkness. Lily opened the closet door inch by inch, wincing at every small sound. Inside, boxes were stacked haphazardly, filled with old clothes, photo albums, and miscellaneous household items. The box she was looking for was at the back, just as she remembered. She carefully moved the other boxes aside, creating a path. When she finally pulled out the right box, her hands were shaking. This box contained the last official record of her father's existence, the medical documents that detailed his final weeks. She carried it back to her room, closed the door, and turned on her small desk lamp. The tape resisted at first, but she managed to peel it away. Inside were folders, each labeled with dates. She pulled them out one by one, spreading them across her bed. There were doctor's notes, test results, medication lists, admission forms. The medical terminology was mostly incomprehensible to her, but she could read enough to understand the basics. Patient presents with difficulty breathing, cause unknown, oxygen saturation dropping, skin discoloration noted. Patient reports sensation in throat, no obstruction found upon examination, continue monitoring. The notes went on like that, page after page of observations and tests that led nowhere. But Lily wasn't looking for the diagnosis. She was looking for the symptoms, the specific details that she could match to what she knew about Daniel Aldridge. She found what she needed in a nurse's report from 3 days before her father died. The handwriting was neat and precise. Patient continues to complain of foreign body sensation in throat. Exam reveals no visible obstruction. Notable, unusual odor in patient room, source undetermined. There it was, the smell, the throat complaint, the mysterious deterioration. Everything that was happening now with Daniel Aldridge had happened to her father. Lily carefully placed the documents back in order, keeping out the pages that seemed most relevant. She would bring these to the hospital tomorrow and find someone who would listen. The next morning, Lily woke early, before her alarm even went off. She had barely slept, her mind too active with plans and worries. She dressed quickly and carefully placed the medical documents in her backpack, tucking them inside a folder to keep them safe. Her mother was already in the kitchen, preparing breakfast before her morning shift. "You're up early," Maria observed, glancing at her daughter with mild concern. "I'm fine, Mama," Lily replied, forcing herself to sound normal. Maria smiled tiredly and turned back to the stove. She had no reason to suspect that her daughter was carrying documents she had deliberately hidden away, or that Lily was planning to do something that terrified and excited her in equal measure. The school day was torture. Lily couldn't focus on anything her teachers said. Math problems blurred together, history lessons went in one ear and out the other. Her best friend Sophia asked her twice if something was wrong, but Lily just shook her head and said she was tired. How could she explain what she was planning? Sophia wouldn't understand. Nobody would understand until she made them see. When the final bell rang, Lily practically ran out of the building. Instead of taking the school bus to the hospital as usual, she went straight there, walking quickly through the familiar streets. The backpack felt heavier with each step, weighed down not by the physical documents, but by the responsibility they represented. She arrived at St. Michael's Medical Center just after 4 o'clock. Her mother's shift didn't start until 5, which meant Lily had an hour to act on her own. She headed straight for the VIP wing, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. The security guard at the entrance held up his hand as she approached. "Sorry, kid." "I need to talk to one of the doctors," Lily said, trying to keep her voice steady. "It's about the patient." The guard's expression didn't change. "Unless you're family or authorized medical staff, you can't go in." "But I have information," Lily insisted, clutching her backpack. The guard sighed, his patience already thin from 3 days of dealing with reporters and curious onlookers. Look, I'm sure you think you can help, but the doctors have everything under control. Lily felt frustration rising in her chest. He knew who she was. Everyone who worked at the hospital knew Maria's daughter, the quiet girl who sat in the corridors doing homework. But knowing who she was didn't mean he took her seriously. To him, she was just a child with an overactive imagination. Please, she tried again, just let me talk to someone, anyone. Can't do it, kid. Lily backed away, her cheeks burning with embarrassment and anger, but she didn't give up. She walked down the corridor, turned a corner, and waited. She knew the hospital's layout well after years of spending time here. There were other ways to get close to the VIP wing. Side hallways that the cleaning staff used, back staircases that connected different floors. She just had to be patient and watch for an opportunity. 20 minutes later, she saw her chance. A group of nurses emerged from the VIP wing, chatting among themselves as they headed toward the break room. In the brief moment when the door was closing, Lily slipped through. Her heart raced as she found herself in the restricted area, knowing she could be removed at any moment. The VIP wing was quieter than the main hospital, more like a luxury hotel than a medical facility. Thick carpets muffled footsteps, expensive artwork hung on the walls. But Lily wasn't interested in the decor. She was looking for someone, anyone who might listen to her. She spotted a nurse coming out of a room, carrying a tray of medical supplies. Lily approached quickly before she could lose her nerve. "Excuse me?" The nurse looked startled to see a child in the VIP wing. "How did you get in here?" "I know, but please just listen," Lily said rapidly, pulling the folder from her backpack. "My father died 6 months ago with the same symptoms. The same exact symptoms. Gray skin, breathing problems, that weird smell." The nurse glanced at the folder but didn't take it. "Sweetheart, I'm sure your father's death was very difficult, but you can't be back here." Lily's voice rose with desperation. "My father said there was something in his throat, something alive. The doctors didn't believe him." The nurse's expression softened with sympathy, but it was the kind of sympathy adults gave to children they didn't take seriously. "I understand you're trying to help, but the doctors know what they're doing. Sometimes when we lose someone we love, we see connections that aren't really there. It's okay, it's normal." Lily felt tears of frustration burning behind her eyes. She refused to let them fall. "Look at the records, please." The nurse gently but firmly took Lily's arm and began guiding her back toward the entrance. "Come on, let's find your mother." Lily tried to pull away, but the nurse's grip was too strong. Within moments, they were back at the security checkpoint. "Make sure she doesn't come back here," the nurse instructed the guard. Then, turning to Lily with that same pitying expression, she added, "I'm sorry about your father. I really am." Lily stood in the main corridor, clutching her folder, feeling utterly defeated. She had tried. She had spoken up, and nobody would listen. Was this how her father had felt, knowing something was wrong, but being unable to make anyone understand? She walked slowly to her usual bench and sat down heavily. The folder lay in her lap, full of information that could potentially save a life, but useless if nobody would look at it. Maybe everyone was right. Maybe she was just a grieving child, seeing patterns where none existed. Maybe her father's death had nothing to do with what was happening to Daniel Aldridge. But even as she thought these things, Lily knew they weren't true. The connection was real. She had seen it too clearly, felt it too strongly. The symptoms were identical. The progression was the same. And that smell, that strange, earthy smell that had haunted her father's room, was present in Daniel's case too. The nurse from yesterday had mentioned it. Lily opened the folder again and stared at the documents. There had to be another way. Someone else she could approach. Someone who might actually listen to a 10-year-old girl with a dead father and a folder full of medical records. Lily remained on the bench for the next hour, turning possibilities over in her mind. The folder sat beside her, representing both hope and frustration. She watched the hospital's rhythm continue around her. Doctors rushing past with clipboards, families waiting anxiously for news, orderlies pushing patients in wheelchairs. Everyone had somewhere to be, something important to do. Nobody noticed the small girl sitting alone with documents that might hold the key to saving a life. When her mother arrived for her shift at 5 o'clock, Lily quickly stuffed the folder back into her backpack. Maria looked even more exhausted than usual, her shoulders sagging under the weight of another long day ahead. Maria asked, dropping a kiss on Lily's forehead. "Just got here from school," Lily lied, lying, hating the deception, but knowing her mother wouldn't understand. "Tired," Maria managed a weak smile. "But we need the money, so here I am." Maria squeezed her daughter's shoulder and headed off to get her cleaning cart. Lily watched her go, feeling a pang of guilt. Her mother worked so hard, sacrificed so much, all to keep them afloat after Roberto's death. And here Lily was, sneaking around with stolen documents, causing trouble in restricted hospital wings. But this was bigger than following rules. This was about saving someone's life, and maybe, finally, understanding what had happened to her father. Lily pulled out her homework to maintain the appearance of normalcy, but her eyes kept drifting back to the VIP wing. Through the glass doors, she could see the occasional movement of medical staff. Somewhere, beyond those doors, Daniel Aldridge was dying, just like her father had died. And somewhere in this massive hospital, there had to be at least one person who would listen to her. Around 6:30, Lily noticed a doctor emerge from the VIP wing. She recognized him from the past few days. He was older than most of the other doctors, with gray hair and wire-rimmed glasses. Unlike the others, who always seemed to be rushing, he moved with deliberate calm. She had seen him before, actually, during her father's hospitalization. He had been kind to her then, one of the few doctors who acknowledged her presence. Dr. James Patterson. The name came back to her suddenly. He had been the one to explain to her mother, in simple terms she could understand, what they were doing to try to help Roberto. He hadn't spoken down to them or used complicated medical jargon to hide his uncertainty. He had been honest and compassionate. Lily made a split-second decision. She grabbed her backpack and followed him down the corridor, keeping enough distance not to be obvious, but close enough not to lose him. He turned into a small office near the main nursing station. The door remained partially open. Lily approached slowly, her heart hammering. This was it, her last chance. If Dr. Patterson wouldn't listen, she didn't know what else she could do. She stood in the doorway, suddenly unsure how to begin. Dr. Patterson looked up from the papers on his desk and spotted her. Recognition flickered across his face. "You're Maria's daughter, aren't you?" She nodded, surprised and relieved that he remembered her name. "Is everything all right?" "She's fine." Lily took a deep breath. "Doctor..." His eyebrows rose slightly. "The patient in the VIP wing?" "My father died here 6 months ago, Roberto Torres." Dr. Patterson's expression softened. "I remember. I'm very sorry for your loss, Lily." "He had the same symptoms as Daniel Aldridge," Lily said quickly, before her courage could fail. "The same exact symptoms." Dr. Patterson leaned back in his chair, studying her carefully. Unlike the nurse earlier, he didn't immediately dismiss her. Lily pulled the folder from her backpack and stepped into the office. "I have his medical records. I know I'm just a kid, but I was there every day. I saw everything. The gray skin, the breathing problems, the way his condition got worse no matter what medicine you gave him. And there was a smell in his room." At the mention of the smell, Dr. Patterson's attention sharpened. Like earth, like when it rains and the ground gets wet. Dr. Patterson was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. Then he gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Sit down, Lily." Relief flooded through her. Someone was finally listening. Lily sat down and began talking. She told him about how her father had been healthy before his trip to West Africa for a construction project. How he had come back feeling fine at first, but then started getting sick about 2 weeks later. How the symptoms had appeared gradually, then accelerated rapidly in the final week. "He kept saying something was in his throat," Lily continued.
her voice steady despite the painful memories. He said it felt like something was stuck there, something that moved. Dr. Patterson opened the folder she had brought and began reading through the documents. His expression grew more serious with each page. These notes mentioned the throat complaints multiple times. He looked up at Lily. "I don't know exactly where. Somewhere in Nigeria, I think." "Yes." Dr. Patterson was quiet again, his mind clearly working through something. Then he reached for his phone and dialed a number. "Dr. Chen, it's Patterson. I need you to come to my office. Now." He hung up and turned back to Lily. "I want you to tell Dr. Chen everything you just told me. She's the lead physician on Daniel's case." Lily nodded eagerly. "Yes." Within 5 minutes, Dr. Chen appeared in the doorway. She looked harried and exhausted, her white coat wrinkled and her hair pulled back in a messy bun. "James, what is it?" "Sarah, this is Lily Torres. Her father died here 6 months ago with symptoms remarkably similar to what we're seeing in the Aldridge boy." Dr. Chen's initial reaction was skepticism. Lily could see it clearly on her face. But Dr. Patterson's serious expression made her pause. She stepped into the office and closed the door behind her. "All right." Lily went through everything again, this time in more detail.
She described watching her father decline day by day. She mentioned the specific way his breathing had changed, becoming shallow and labored. She talked about the gray discoloration of his skin and how it had seemed to spread from his face downward. And she emphasized repeatedly her father's insistence that something was in his throat. Dr. Chen picked up the medical records and scanned them quickly. Her professional mask slipped for a moment, and Lily saw genuine interest in her eyes. "The symptom progression is remarkably similar," she admitted. "But correlation doesn't necessarily mean causation." Dr. Patterson interjected. "You mentioned it yesterday." "Yes," Dr. Chen confirmed. Lily's father's room had the same smell. Dr. Chen looked at Lily with new attention. "Yes, ma'am." Dr. Chen was talking more to herself now than to them. "But what if exposure didn't require travel?" Dr. Chen pulled a chair closer and sat down, her full attention now focused on Lily and the documents spread across Dr. Patterson's desk. The skepticism had disappeared from her face, replaced by intense concentration. She was no longer looking at a child with a sad story, but at a potential witness to something important. "Lily, I need you to think very carefully," Dr. Chen said. "In the days before your father got sick, did anything unusual happen? Did he bring anything back from his trip?" Lily thought back to those weeks, trying to remember details she hadn't considered important at the time. "He brought back some carvings, wood carvings he bought from local artists, and some fabric for my mother." Both doctors looked up sharply. "Yes?" Dr. Patterson asked. "Yes, he said it was from the site where they built the school. He wanted to keep it as a memory." Lily paused, a memory surfacing. "After he got sick, she threw it away." Dr. Chen and Dr. Patterson exchanged a meaningful glance. Dr. Chen asked urgently, "I don't know exactly. Maybe a week after he came home?" Dr. Chen stood abruptly. "We need to check something. James, can you stay with Lily?" She left the office quickly, pulling out her phone as she walked. Dr. Patterson turned to Lily with a gentle smile. "You may have just given us our first real lead in days." Lily asked, hope and anxiety mixing in her chest. "I don't know yet, but Dr. Chen is one of the best diagnosticians I've ever worked with." They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes. The rolling of carts, distant conversations, the occasional overhead page. But everything felt different now. She wasn't invisible anymore. People were listening. Dr. Chen returned 20 minutes later with 2 other doctors Lily didn't recognize. One was a younger man in his 30s with dark circles under his eyes. The other was a woman with silver hair pulled back in a tight bun. "This is Dr. Marcus Webb, our infectious disease specialist," Dr. Chen introduced the younger man. "And Dr. Kowalski shook Lily's hand with surprising formality. "Dr. Chen tells me your father recently returned from rural Nigeria before becoming ill." Lily shook her head. "I don't know the exact place, just that it was somewhere they were building a school." "Did he mention anything about the environment?" Dr. Kowalski pressed. "He said there were a lot of trees, and it rained a lot while he was there." Dr. Kowalski nodded, making notes. Tropical rainforest region, most likely. She turned to Dr. Chen. But the boy hasn't been to Africa, Dr. Webb interjected. That's what we need to figure out, Dr. Chen said. But first, we need to know what we're looking for. Lily, you said your father complained about something in his throat, something that moved. Lily closed her eyes, trying to remember her father's exact words. He said it felt like scratching, like tiny scratches inside his throat. Dr. Kowalski's expression grew grim. That's consistent with parasitic infection. Some tropical parasites can lodge in the upper respiratory tract. Dr. Patterson asked. Some parasites are remarkably good at hiding, Dr. Kowalski explained. They can flatten themselves against tissue, move deeper when they sense light or disturbance. Without knowing specifically what you're looking for, it's easy to miss them. Dr. Chen turned to Dr. Webb. We'd need to do a deep laryngoscopy with specialized equipment, not just a standard throat exam. We'd need to look past the vocal cords into the upper trachea. Can we do that now? Dr. Chen asked. The boy's condition is critical, Dr. Webb said carefully. Any invasive procedure carries risks. Dr. Kowalski was reading through Roberto Torres's medical records now, her expression growing more concerned with each page. The deterioration pattern here is consistent with progressive airway obstruction. Something was blocking airflow, but not completely. The boy's oxygen saturation has been dropping steadily, Dr. Chen confirmed, despite supplemental oxygen. Because scans won't show a soft-bodied parasite that's pressed flat against tissue, Dr. Kowalski said. It would just look like slightly thickened mucosa. The doctors fell into rapid discussion, using medical terminology that flew over Lily's head. She understood enough to know they were taking her seriously now, that her father's case was providing crucial information. But she also sensed their hesitation. They were dealing with the son of one of the most powerful men in the country. Any wrong move could have serious consequences. Finally, Dr. Chen seemed to reach a decision. I'm going to recommend the deep laryngoscopy to Marcus Aldridge. I'll explain that we have reason to believe it might be a parasitic infection based on a similar case. James, can you pull together everything we have on Roberto Torres's case? Helen, I need you to prepare a list of possible parasites that match this profile. The doctors dispersed quickly, each moving with new purpose and direction. Dr. Chen paused at the door and looked back at Lily. Thank you. What you did today took real courage. After they left, Lily sat alone in Dr. Patterson's office, the weight of what had just happened settling over her. She had done it. Someone had finally listened. But now came the hard part, waiting to see if she was right. Dr. Patterson returned a few minutes later with a sandwich and a juice box. Thought you might be hungry, Lily asked, accepting the food gratefully. Now we wait. Dr. Chen is meeting with Daniel's father. If he agrees to the procedure, they'll do it tonight. And if she's wrong? Dr. Patterson sat down with a sigh. Then we're back to square one. But Sarah Chen doesn't make recommendations lightly. Marcus Aldridge stood in the small consultation room, his face a mask of exhaustion and barely contained fear. Dr. Chen had just finished explaining the theory about a possible parasitic infection supported by the case of Roberto Torres. She had been careful, thorough, and honest about the risks involved in the procedure she was recommending. Let me understand this correctly, Marcus said, his voice tight with tension. I know how it sounds, Dr. Chen replied calmly, but the symptom correlation is too significant to ignore. Your son is deteriorating despite our best efforts. Every conventional treatment has failed. With his current condition, any invasive procedure carries risks. The laryngoscopy itself could trigger respiratory distress. We'd have to intubate him, which means putting him on a ventilator temporarily. There's always a risk of complications. But, Mr. Aldridge, if we do nothing, your son will die. Marcus turned away, his hands clenched into fists. And if you do this procedure and find nothing? Then we'll have ruled out one more possibility, but I don't think we'll find nothing. Evidence from a child, Marcus said, but his voice had lost some of its edge. He was a desperate father, grasping for any hope, no matter how unlikely. A very observant child who watched her father die under remarkably similar circumstances, Dr. Chen countered. Sometimes the most important observations come from unexpected sources. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he turned back to face Dr. Chen. Dr. Chen didn't hesitate. Yes. Then do it. He couldn't finish the sentence. I understand. We'll take every precaution. Within an hour, the operating room was prepared. Dr. Webb would perform the laryngoscopy, with Dr. Kowalski assisting. Dr. Chen would oversee the entire procedure. An anesthesiologist and 2 surgical nurses completed the team. They moved Daniel from the ICU to the surgical suite with extreme care, every monitor tracking his fragile vital signs. In the waiting area outside the surgical wing, Marcus Aldridge paced like a caged animal. His wife had arrived an hour earlier, her face pale with worry. They spoke in low voices, clinging to each other in their fear. Down in the main corridor, Lily waited on her usual bench. Her mother had finished her shift but agreed to stay when Lily explained, in vague terms, that something important was happening. Maria sat beside her daughter, holding her hand, not fully understanding but offering silent support. Maria asked quietly. Lily looked at her tired face and made a decision. I found Papa's medical records. Maria's expression cycled through shock, hurt, and finally understanding. The box in the closet. I'm sorry, Mama. I know you didn't want to look at those papers, but I remembered everything about Papa's sickness, and this boy has the same symptoms, exactly the same. Maria was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. Your father would be proud of you. In the operating room, Dr. Webb carefully guided the laryngoscope down Daniel's throat. The boy was fully sedated, intubated, and on a ventilator. Every member of the surgical team watched the monitors anxiously as Dr. Webb explored the upper airway. I'm past the vocal cords now, Dr. Webb narrated for the benefit of those watching. Moving into the upper trachea. Mucosa appears slightly inflamed, but everyone in the room tensed. Dr. Chen asked. There's something here. It's flat against the posterior wall, almost invisible. Dr. Webb's voice was carefully controlled, but excitement leaked through. Helen, I need the flexible forceps. Dr. Kowalski handed him the instrument. On the monitor, they could all see what Dr. Webb was seeing. A dark shape pressed against the tissue, barely distinguishable from the surrounding anatomy. It was small, no more than 3 centimeters long, but as Dr. Webb approached it with the forceps, it moved. It's alive, Dr. Kowalski breathed. I'm attempting extraction now, Dr. Webb said. The next few minutes were tense and delicate. Dr. Webb had to maneuver the forceps carefully, trying to grasp the creature without damaging Daniel's airway or pushing the parasite deeper. Twice, it slipped away from the forceps. The third time, he managed to grip it firmly. Got it. Slowly, carefully, Dr. Webb withdrew the laryngoscope. When it emerged, the forceps held a dark, segmented creature that writhed in the bright lights of the operating room. Dr. Chen held out a sterile collection jar, and Dr. Webb deposited the parasite inside and sealed the lid. For a moment, everyone just stared at the jar. The creature inside was unlike anything most of them had ever seen outside of textbooks. It had multiple segments and tiny legs along its body. In the center of the jar, it coiled and uncoiled, searching for the host it had just been removed from. Dr. Chen asked. Dr. Kowalski leaned closer to examine it. It's a centipede, a parasitic centipede. I've only seen this species documented in case studies from equatorial Africa. Scolopendra parasiticus. Dr. Webb asked. Already checking Daniel's vital signs. The monitors showed immediate improvement. His oxygen saturation was climbing steadily. That's what we need to find out, Dr. Chen said grimly, because centipedes don't just crawl into people's throats. The realization hit everyone in the room simultaneously. This wasn't a natural infection. This was deliberate. Someone had intentionally introduced this parasite into Daniel Aldridge's airway. This was attempted murder. "We need to notify security immediately," Dr. Chen said, her voice sharp with urgency, "and the police." Dr. Webb finished removing the intubation tube. Daniel's breathing, for the first time in days, was clear and strong. The color was already beginning to return to his skin. Whatever damage the parasite had done, it wasn't irreversible. The boy would live. "Get this specimen to the lab for analysis," Dr. Chen instructed one of the nurses. "I want to know everything about it." As the surgical team completed their work and prepared to move Daniel back to the ICU for recovery, Dr. Chen stepped out to deliver the news to Marcus Aldridge. He stood immediately when he saw her emerge from the surgical suite. "Your son is going to be fine," Dr. Chen said, and watched the man's knees nearly buckle with relief. "A parasitic centipede, extremely rare." She paused. "Mr. Aldridge, this wasn't a natural infection." The police arrived at St. Michael's Medical Center within 30 minutes of Dr. Chen's call. Two detectives, Sarah Morrison and James Lee, took control of the situation with practiced efficiency. They interviewed the medical staff, examined the operating room, and photographed the parasite specimen from every angle. What had begun as a medical mystery had transformed into a criminal investigation. Marcus Aldridge sat in a private conference room with the detectives, his earlier relief now mixed with cold rage. Who would do this to my son? Detective Morrison, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and gray-streaked hair, flipped through her notebook. "Mr. Aldridge, we need you to think carefully. Has anyone threatened you recently?" Marcus laughed bitterly. "I'm a pharmaceutical billionaire. I have competitors, rivals, people who disagree with my business practices." Detective Lee pressed, "And not just any murder, but one this elaborate and specific?" "I don't know," Marcus admitted, running his hands through his hair. "I need time to think." Dr. Kowalski was called in to brief the detectives. She brought the specimen jar and several reference books. Scolopendra parasiticus is found exclusively in the rainforests of West Africa, primarily in Nigeria and surrounding regions. It's a specialized species that has evolved to live temporarily in the upper respiratory tracts of certain mammals. Detective Morrison asked. "That's the concerning part. They're not commercially available. You can't order them online or find them in any legitimate collection. Someone would have had to travel to West Africa, specifically to the regions where these creatures live, and collect them personally." Detective Lee was taking detailed notes. "The parasite would need to be placed directly in the throat while the victim was unconscious or heavily sedated. It can't crawl up from the stomach or enter through the nose on its own." The detectives exchanged meaningful glances. So someone had access to the boy while he was here in the hospital. Dr. Chen joined the meeting at this point. "We've begun reviewing security footage from the VIP wing for the past week." Detective Morrison asked. "Dozens. Doctors, nurses, specialists, cleaning staff, food service workers, and that's not counting the private security that Dr. Chen spread her hands helplessly. "It's a hospital." "We'll need a list of everyone who entered that wing," Detective Lee said. While the investigation unfolded upstairs, Lily remained in the main corridor with her mother. Dr. Patterson had come down an hour ago to tell them that the surgery had been successful, that they had found exactly what Lily had suspected, a parasite, just like the one that had killed her father. "Lily?" asked quietly. Maria squeezed her daughter's hand. "I don't know, mija." As if summoned by the question, Detective Morrison appeared in the corridor. She had been briefed on Lily's role in breaking the case and wanted to speak with her directly. Maria stood protectively close as the detective approached. "Lily Torres, I'm Detective Morrison." Lily nodded, suddenly shy in the presence of official authority. "That was very observant of you, very brave." They moved to a quiet corner, and Lily answered the detective's questions as thoroughly as she could. She described her father's trip to Nigeria, the construction project, the soil he had brought home. She explained how her mother had thrown away the box of soil because it smelled bad. Detective Morrison asked. Maria answered this time. "Maybe a week after Roberto came home, I was cleaning the bedroom and the smell was bothering me." "No." Detective Morrison made notes. "And your husband never mentioned bringing anything else back?" "No, just some carvings and fabric."
Maria's voice grew strained. You think someone put that thing in my husband's throat too? I don't know yet. It's possible his was a natural infection from exposure to contaminated soil. The detective paused. Mrs. Torres, I'm going to recommend that your husband's case be reopened for investigation. Maria nodded, tears forming in her eyes. Yes. After Detective Morrison left, Lily and Maria sat together in silence. The hospital around them continued its eternal rhythm, but both of them felt as though they were standing at the edge of something enormous and frightening. Upstairs, the security review had yielded something interesting. A man had been recorded entering and exiting Daniel's room multiple times over the past week, always during shift changes when the hallway was busiest. He wore a white coat and carried a hospital ID badge, but when they tried to match his face to employee records, they found nothing. He's not in our system, the head of security told the detectives. Detective Lee asked. The security officer pulled up the best footage and enhanced it. The man appeared to be in his 50s, with dark hair graying at the temples and a thin face. He moved with confidence, like someone who belonged there. But his badge, when zoomed in, showed a blurry photo and partially obscured credentials. Fake ID, Detective Morrison said immediately. Marcus Aldridge demanded he had been called in to view the footage. Your son's wing has been extremely busy with all the specialists coming and going, the security officer explained apologetically. Marcus stared at the frozen image on the screen. I don't recognize him. We'll circulate this image to all staff, Detective Morrison said. Someone might recognize him. The investigation was expanding rapidly. Police were now examining not just who had access to Daniel, but who might have had access to Roberto Torres 6 months earlier. The working theory was that the same person might be responsible for both cases, though the motive remained unclear. Dr. Kowalski provided another crucial piece of information. I've examined the parasite more closely, Detective Lee asked. Someone has altered its behavior patterns. Natural Scolopendra parasiticus has a lifespan of about 2 weeks inside a host before it either leaves voluntarily or is expelled by the immune system. This one has been engineered to survive longer and to be more resistant to detection.
So we're looking for someone with scientific training, Detective Morrison said. Advanced scientific training, Dr. Kowalski corrected. This level of genetic modification requires access to specialized equipment and expertise. The profile was taking shape. Someone with scientific background, knowledge of tropical parasites, access to West Africa, and a motivation to harm Marcus Aldridge's family. The suspect pool was narrowing, but they still had no name. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. One of the hospital's senior nurses, Eleanor Grant, had been working at St. Michael's for over 30 years. When Detective Morrison circulated the enhanced image of the fake doctor, Eleanor studied it carefully and felt a tickle of recognition in the back of her mind. I've seen this face before, she told the detective. Not recently, but years ago. Detective Morrison asked, pulling out her recorder. A researcher. He used to work with Marcus Aldridge back when Aldridge Pharmaceuticals was just starting out. They were partners or something. Eleanor frowned, concentrating. Something with a D. David? Daniel? No, wait. Damien. Damien Reeves. That's it. Detective Morrison immediately ran the name through police databases. What she found was illuminating and disturbing. Damien Reeves had indeed been Marcus Aldridge's business partner in the early days of Aldridge Pharmaceuticals. They had worked together on several groundbreaking projects in tropical disease research. But 15 years ago, the partnership had ended in spectacular fashion. Reeves had been accused of falsifying research data and conducting unethical experiments. Marcus Aldridge had been the one to report him to the medical board. The subsequent investigation had destroyed Reeves's career. He lost his medical license, his research grants, and his reputation. The company he and Marcus had built together went solely to Marcus, who bought out Reeves's share for a fraction of what it would eventually be worth. Reeves had filed multiple lawsuits, all of which he lost. He declared bankruptcy, his wife divorced him. According to the last known records, he had left the country 12 years ago, reportedly moving to West Africa to work with humanitarian medical organizations. He's been in West Africa for over a decade, Detective Lee said.
And he has every reason to hate Marcus Aldridge, Detective Morrison added. Detective Lee wondered. Dr. Kowalski, who had been listening to their discussion, offered a possibility. If he's been studying these parasites for years, learning their behaviors, modifying their genetics, it would take time. This isn't a crime of passion. This is calculated, methodical revenge. Marcus Aldridge's face had gone pale as he listened to them discuss Damian Reeves. I haven't thought about Damian in years. Yes, I reported him. Yes, I testified against him. But he was conducting experiments on patients without consent. He was falsifying data that could have led to dangerous drugs being approved. I'm not questioning your actions 15 years ago, Detective Morrison said, but we need to find Reeves now. No, after he left the country, I lost track of him completely. Detective Morrison put out an international alert for Damian Reeves. His passport records showed he had returned to the United States 3 months ago, entering through JFK Airport in New York. After that, his trail went cold. No credit card transactions, no phone records, no digital footprint at all. He had gone underground. He's been planning this for months, Detective Lee said. The hospital security team reviewed their footage again, this time looking specifically for Damian Reeves. They found him appearing sporadically over the past 2 weeks, always in different disguises. Sometimes he wore a white coat and posed as a doctor. Other times he dressed as a technician or maintenance worker. He was careful, never staying long, never drawing attention to himself. How long? Marcus asked, his voice tight with controlled rage. At least 7 occasions that we can confirm, the security officer replied. So he had multiple opportunities to introduce the parasite, Dr. Chen said. Detective Morrison turned to Dr. Kowalski. You said the parasite had been genetically modified. Years. He would need to breed multiple generations, selecting for specific traits, testing different genetic alterations. So he's been planning this revenge for his entire time in Africa, Detective Lee said. Lily, still sitting in the corridor with her mother, had been called back to speak with the detectives. They wanted to know everything about her father's case again, this time with a new framework. Could Roberto Torres have been deliberately targeted as well? Your father worked on a construction project in Nigeria, Detective Morrison said gently. I don't remember the name, Lily said, but he showed me pictures. There were other workers there, and some doctors or nurses. It was a medical clinic they were building, not a school. Detective Morrison's attention sharpened. A medical clinic? Maria, who had been listening quietly, suddenly spoke up. Roberto mentioned it was run by volunteer doctors, international something. Detective Morrison pulled out her phone and searched quickly. International Medical Volunteers. They operate in several West African countries. And, according to their records, one of their senior medical advisors is a doctor. She showed them a photo from the organization's website. It was Damian Reeves, older and thinner, but unmistakably the same man from the hospital security footage. He had been using an alias. That's where your father encountered him, Detective Morrison said to Lily. Reeves probably used the construction workers as test subjects for his parasites. The realization was horrifying. Roberto Torres hadn't been randomly infected. He had been deliberately used as a guinea pig for Reeves's twisted research. The man had spent years perfecting his weapon, testing it on vulnerable workers who had no idea what was being done to them. Maria asked, her voice breaking. We're contacting international medical volunteers now, Detective Lee said. We'll get a list of all the workers who were at that site. Marcus Aldridge had been listening to all of this with growing horror. He killed innocent people just to perfect his method for attacking my son. He's a man consumed by revenge, Detective Morrison corrected, which makes him dangerous and unpredictable. Marcus looked stricken. His plan failed. Daniel survived. Men like Reeves don't handle failure well. He spent 15 years building up to this moment. Hospital security was immediately increased. Armed guards were posted outside Daniel's room around the clock. Everyone entering the VIP wing had their credentials checked and verified against hospital databases.
No one would be allowed near Daniel without multiple layers of confirmation. But Detective Morrison knew that physical security was only part of the solution. They needed to actively hunt down Damian Reeves before he could strike again. She assembled a task force, local police, FBI agents specialized in domestic terrorism, and international authorities who could track his movements in Africa. The investigation revealed more disturbing details. Records from international medical volunteers showed that 3 construction workers had died during or shortly after the clinic project. Now, those cases would be reopened and examined for signs of parasitic infection. Roberto Torres hadn't been the only victim. He was just the only one whose daughter had been observant enough and brave enough to make the connection. As night fell over St. Michael's Medical Center, the hospital had transformed into something resembling a fortress. Police vehicles lined the parking lot, officers patrolled every floor. The media, having gotten wind of the attempted murder story, crowded outside the main entrance with cameras and questions. Inside, Lily sat with her mother in a small waiting room that had been set aside for them. They had been asked to stay at the hospital for their own protection. If Damian Reeves knew that Lily had been instrumental in exposing his plan, she might be in danger too. "I'm scared, Mama," Lily admitted quietly. Maria pulled her daughter close. "Me too, mija, but you did the right thing." "I just wanted to help." "You saved a life, maybe more than one." Detective Morrison knew that waiting for Damian Reeves to make another move was dangerous. They needed to draw him out, force him into a situation where they had control. After consulting with her team and hospital administration, she developed a plan. "We're going to use the media," she explained to Marcus Aldridge. "Right now, Reeves doesn't know his plan failed. He thinks the parasite is still inside your son, slowly killing him." Marcus listened carefully as she laid out the strategy. They would hold a press conference announcing that Daniel's condition had worsened dramatically, that doctors were baffled, and that the family was preparing for the worst. The message would be carefully crafted to suggest the boy was dying, and there was nothing anyone could do. "This will bring him back," Detective Morrison said. "He'll want to witness his revenge. He spent 15 years planning this." "You're using my son as bait," Marcus said flatly. "Your son will be perfectly safe. He'll be moved to a secure location within the hospital. We'll have a decoy in his room, an officer who matches his general build and age. The room will be under constant surveillance." It was risky, but Marcus agreed. The alternative was waiting for Reeves to strike at a time and place of his choosing. At least this way, they controlled the circumstances. The press conference was held the following morning. Dr. Chen, looking appropriately grave, spoke to the assembled reporters about Daniel Aldridge's mysterious illness. She described his deteriorating condition and admitted that despite the best efforts of specialists from around the world, they were running out of options. The family, she said, was facing the possibility that Daniel might not survive. The story ran on every major news network. Within hours, it had spread across social media. The narrative was compelling. A billionaire's son dying from an illness no one could explain or cure. Money and power were meaningless in the face of this mysterious disease. In a small motel room 30 miles from the hospital, Damian Reeves watched the press conference on a grainy television. A smile spread across his gaunt face. It was working. After all these years, his revenge was finally succeeding. Marcus Aldridge would know the pain of losing everything that mattered. Reeves had been careful since the hospital visit. He had been watching from a distance, monitoring news reports, waiting for confirmation. Now he had it. The boy was dying, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. The parasite he had spent years perfecting was doing its job. But Reeves wanted more than just the satisfaction of success. He wanted to see Marcus Aldridge's face when his son died. He wanted to witness the moment when all of Marcus's wealth and power proved useless. He wanted Marcus to know, somehow, that this was revenge for what had been done to him 15 years ago. He began planning his return to the hospital. It would be tricky with all the extra security, but Reeves had already proven he could infiltrate the building. He had contacts, resources, and most importantly, nothing left to lose. His entire life had been destroyed. This revenge was all he had left.
At St. Michael's Medical Center, preparations continued. Daniel had been moved to a secure room on a different floor, surrounded by armed guards. His recovery was progressing well, and he had even regained consciousness, though he remained weak and confused about what had happened. In his original room, a young police officer named Jake Martinez lay in the hospital bed, connected to monitors that had been adjusted to show readings consistent with a patient in critical condition. He was wearing makeup to give his skin a grayish pallor. The room had been rigged with hidden cameras covering every angle. Detective Morrison and Detective Lee monitored everything from a command center set up in a nearby office. They had officers stationed throughout the hospital, all of them carrying photos of Damian Reeves. The trap was set. Now they just had to wait. 2 days passed with no sign of Reeves. The press continued to cover Daniel's condition. Dr. Chen gave regular updates, each one more pessimistic than the last. The family released a statement asking for privacy during this difficult time. Everything was designed to draw Reeves out of hiding. On the third night, around 2 in the morning, movement was detected in the service corridor adjacent to the VIP wing. Security cameras picked up a figure dressed in maintenance coveralls pushing a cleaning cart. The face was partially obscured by a cap, but the build and movement pattern matched Damian Reeves. "We've got him," Detective Morrison said quietly into her radio. "All units stand ready. Do not move until he's in the room." They watched as Reeves made his way through the corridor, moving with practiced ease. He had clearly scouted the route multiple times. He knew where the cameras were, how to angle his body to avoid clear facial shots. But he didn't know that every camera in the building had been upgraded and repositioned over the past 2 days. Reeves approached the security checkpoint outside the VIP wing. The guard on duty, a police officer in disguise, checked his fake credentials without really looking at them. They had been instructed to let him through. Reeves walked past, his cart rolling smoothly on the polished floor. He stopped outside Daniel's room and glanced around. The hallway was empty. He pushed the door open and entered, the cart following behind him. Detective Morrison watched the monitor intently. Inside the room, Officer Martinez lay perfectly still, his eyes closed, his chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. The monitors beeped steadily with their false readings. Reeves approached the bed slowly. He stood there for a long moment, just looking at the figure he believed to be Daniel Aldridge. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small glass vial. Inside was another parasite, dark and coiled, a backup in case the first one had somehow been discovered and removed. "I wanted you to know," Reeves said quietly to the unconscious form. "I wanted you to understand that this is your father's fault." He leaned closer, preparing to introduce the second parasite. That's when Officer Martinez opened his eyes and grabbed Reeves's wrist. "Police!" The door burst open and 6 officers flooded into the room, weapons drawn. Reeves struggled for a moment, his face contorted with rage and disbelief. The vial fell from his hand and shattered on the floor. The parasite inside writhed across the tiles. "Damian Reeves, you're under arrest for attempted murder," Detective Morrison announced, entering the room. Reeves stopped struggling. His face cycled through emotions, shock, rage, and finally resignation. "You?" he asked. "A 10-year-old girl figured out your plan," Detective Morrison said. "She noticed something 17 specialists missed." Something broke in Reeves's expression. All those years of planning, of careful preparation, undone by a child. The irony was too much. He began to laugh, a bitter, hollow sound that echoed in the hospital room. Officers handcuffed him and led him away. As they walked through the corridor, Marcus Aldridge stepped out from a nearby doorway. He had been watching everything from the command center. The 2 men locked eyes. Reeves's laughter died away. "You destroyed my life," he said. "You destroyed your own life," Marcus replied coldly, "when you decided to falsify research and experiment on patients without consent." Marcus's expression shifted slightly. "He died because I couldn't afford his medical treatment," Reeves's voice broke. For a moment, Marcus said nothing. Then, "I'm sorry about your son, truly. But that doesn't justify what you did. You killed innocent people." An eye for an eye, Reeves said quietly as the officers led him toward the elevator. Marcus watched until they disappeared from view. He felt no satisfaction, no sense of victory, just emptiness, and the realization of how much pain could ripple out from a single decision made years ago. Detective Morrison joined him in the hallway. "We'll need your full statement, but that can wait until morning." Marcus nodded and let her lead him to where Daniel was recovering.
When he entered the room and saw his son sitting up in bed, pale but alive and aware, emotion finally overwhelmed him. He sat on the edge of the bed and held Daniel close. "It's over," he said. 3 weeks after Damian Reeves's arrest, St. Michael's Medical Center held a private ceremony in one of its conference rooms. The event was small, attended only by key hospital staff, the Aldrich family, and 2 special guests, Lily Torres and her mother Maria. Daniel Aldrich had made a full recovery. The damage caused by the parasite had healed, and he was scheduled to be discharged the following day. He sat beside his father, still thin, but with color returned to his cheeks and life back in his eyes. Dr. Chen stood at the front of the room. "We're here today to recognize someone whose observation and courage saved a life." Lily Torres noticed connections that trained professionals missed. She persisted, even when no one would listen. Lily sat between her mother and Dr. Patterson, feeling embarrassed by the attention. She had never wanted recognition or praise. She had simply wanted to help, to prevent another family from experiencing the loss her own family had endured. Marcus Aldrich stepped forward. "Lily, I owe you a debt I can never fully repay. You gave me back my son." He handed her a folder. Inside were documents establishing the Roberto Torres Foundation for Medical Advocacy. The foundation would be dedicated to ensuring that all patients, regardless of their economic status, had their voices heard in medical settings. It would provide resources for families navigating complex medical situations and fund research into rare tropical diseases. "Your father's case has been officially reopened," Marcus continued. "The investigation has confirmed that he was deliberately infected by Damian Reeves as part of his research. We can't bring your father back, but we can make sure his death leads to something meaningful." Maria began to cry quietly. Lily held her mother's hand, feeling the weight of loss and purpose intertwining. Her father's death had been a terrible tragedy, but it had also been the key that unlocked the mystery of Daniel's illness. In a strange way, Roberto Torres had saved a life even after his own had ended. "There's something else," Marcus said. He looked at Maria directly. "I've established a scholarship fund in your husband's name." "Mr. Aldrich, that's too much," Maria protested, but Marcus shook his head. "It's not nearly enough. Your daughter has a gift for observation and a courage that most adults lack." Daniel, who had been quiet until now, stood up and walked over to Lily. He was still unsteady on his feet, but he moved with determination. "Thank you," he said simply, "for not giving up." Lily looked up at the boy whose life she had saved. He was 2 years older than her, from a completely different world, but in this moment they shared something profound. "I'm sorry about what happened to you," she said. The investigation into Damian Reeves had uncovered the full scope of his crimes. 5 construction workers in Nigeria had been deliberately infected with parasites over a 3-year period. 3 had died, including Roberto Torres. 2 others had survived but suffered permanent respiratory damage. International authorities were working to identify and compensate the families. Reeves himself was awaiting trial on multiple charges: attempted murder, conducting illegal human experiments, and bioterrorism. The evidence against him was overwhelming. He would spend the rest of his life in prison. Dr. Kowalski had taken custody of all the parasite specimens and was working with international health organizations to ensure that Reeves's research was destroyed and could never be replicated. The genetically modified organisms he had created were too dangerous to exist. As the ceremony concluded, people mingled and talked quietly. Dr. Chen approached Lily with a smile. Lily shook her head. "Not really." "You have time," Dr. Chen agreed. "But if you're ever interested in medicine, I think you'd be extraordinary at it." Later that evening, as Lily and Maria rode the bus home, they sat in comfortable silence. The city passed by outside the windows, lights beginning to twinkle as darkness fell. Lily thought about everything that had happened, how her grief over her father had transformed into action that saved another child's life. "Mama," she said quietly, Do you think Papa knows? Maria wrapped her arm around her daughter. I think he does, and I think he's very proud of you. The bus continued through the city, carrying them home. Behind them, St. Michael's Medical Center rose into the evening sky, its windows glowing with light. Inside those walls, Daniel Aldridge was packing for his discharge, preparing to return to his life. Dr. Chen was reviewing cases, forever changed by the reminder to listen carefully to every voice.
And in a small office, Dr. Patterson was updating Roberto Torres's medical file, finally marking it as solved. A 10-year-old girl had changed everything simply by refusing to stay silent, by trusting what she had seen, and by believing that even the smallest voice deserved to be heard.